time to invest into yourself and to grow spiritually, I believe is investing into your future. And so I just want to encourage you and say, you're going to leave forever changed and different in Jesus' name. God bless you guys.
Let's give it up for Nick Nilsson.
Yeah.
Well, my name is Brent Silkey, and it's an honor to be here. I think it's so cool that we get to be a part of history. Like, something like this hasn't really happened before in our nation, that we could come together as young adult leaders. And so I just want to shout out before the panel comes up, thank you, Josiah and Micah and Jimmy and Matt Martinez and Logan. Thank you guys, Morgan, for everything that you guys have done to make this happen, that we could be poured into as leaders. Because as leaders, as volunteers, as staff, as people who pour our lives out, there are few times when we can come together with other leaders and be poured into for an entire weekend. So thank you guys. Can we give it up, please, for these amazing people? And before I have them come up and introduce themselves, actually, I just felt like God just put something on my heart so strongly, and I've been sharing this with a couple of senior pastors that I've been talking to, but I think it is so relevant for us today. In an unprecedented time in the world where people are gripped with fear, I see this as an unprecedented time for us to be hope carriers to a world that is freaking out. And if we as leaders can lean into these moments, these holy moments, and hear from the Holy Spirit, I believe that the church will explode like it's never exploded before. In the first century, there was persecution. They split. Everyone went their own way. And God used the persecution and the split for the gospel to spread like wildfire. And I believe this in our young adult ministries, our college campus ministries, our churches, that this is a time where the world is freaking out, but I believe God, as we can't meet in groups of more than 250 here in Minnesota, I believe that God is going to use this for invitations of people. Instead of, you can't stop the church. You can stop the meeting of 250 or more, but you cannot stop the movement of God through his church. And I believe that this is a season where God is going to use us relationally to say, hey, would you come into my home? I'll make you brunch. We can live stream our Sunday service. I believe that those are going to open doors to things that we have never seen before, and that people, as they're looking at the end of life or thinking about what is going to happen with my life, that this could be a season where God does immeasurably more than we could ever ask for or imagine. And that's my prayer, and I believe that is a word for us today. And we're really honored today to have the Young Adult, if you guys don't know the Young Adults Out Today podcast, it's my favorite podcast. I'm a podcast junkie. Every Monday, cannot wait to hear from a local expert, a global expert, a person that has some kind of expertise in a specific field. Like Dr. Tennyson, I think was one of your best listened to so far messages. I think I listened to it 4 times. I couldn't get enough of like, whoa, what did he just say? And he'll be here later today. But we have the opportunity today, the people behind the scenes that put this whole conference on, who put the podcast on, to actually ask them real-time questions. And I know that we come from different ministry contexts and different settings, but we have the opportunity to think about what are the things that you're like, man, I've always wanted to ask Josiah and Micah this question, or I've always wanted to know from Logan Ketterling, how do you guys do this in a multi-site, or from Jimmy coming from a more rural setting. And so this is an awesome thing. So can we just give it up for our young adults out today, the leadership team, and as they come, we're just going to come and clap for them, invite them up on this panel. Love it. And they do a thing at the end of their podcast. It's my favorite part of the podcast as well. It's called 5 and 5, where they ask 5 questions, rapid fire style, and you get 1 minute to answer. And so as you have questions for them today, think about what they are. There are some that have already been submitted, but we're gonna limit panel. We're gonna limit your responses to about a minute. And so I want to just go down the line. If you could just introduce yourself, where you're from, where you're serving, your name, and how long you've been doing young adult ministry, that'd be awesome.
Hey, I'm Jimmy Leasure. I am from Hillside Church in Mankato, Minnesota. It's about an hour south from here. And more rural setting, and excited to be here.
I'm Logan Ketterling. I get the privilege to serve at a church called River Valley here in the Twin Cities. We're a multi-site church, and I'm our young adults pastor, and I have been doing it for just over 3 years now, so I love it.
My name is Micah Kennealy, and Josiah and I planted a Chi Alpha after coming out of a church setting, and we've been there this is our 4th semester for 2 years almost, wrapping up Normandale Community College, 15,000 students, so we're excited.
And in addition to leading full-time with Chi Alpha on Normandale Community College campus, one of our responsibilities or assignments from God is to lead a movement called Minnesota Young Adults, which is really the birthplace of Young Adults Today podcast, the birthplace of Young Adults Today conference, and we just believe in leading leaders and helping this panel. Our team, I so desperately wish Matt Martinez could be here as well. He has been just invaluable to our panel, to our team, to the brainstorming, planning meetings. He is on staff at a church called Oak Hills Church in Eagan. He is a youth pastor, come on somebody, who's also a young adult pastor. And we see so many churches where maybe you're wearing multiple hats. You're the worship person and young adults, or kids and young adults, or youth and a young adults, or associate and young adults. You see, and so that's kind of just our team. When Micah and I were asked by our district superintendent to just take the charge and hold the mantle of young adults in the state of Minnesota, we just said, okay, and we need a team to do that. And so when we were praying about how do we build a team, we realized we needed a youth pastor who was also effectively ministering to young adults. We needed somebody in an urban setting, in a suburban setting, and then in a multi-site setting. And so that's kind of why you see a lot of different, and I'll just brag on Morgan Pearson and Marissa. They have been, like, Morgan has been just a right hand to us with planning the conference and a lot of things behind the scenes. So if we can just say thank you there, but that's our team.
That's great. Well, thank you guys so much. Just to remind you, just think about what are your questions that you have about young adult ministry. Think about those things. The first question I have submitted here already, and I think this is actually really interesting. What age group are we talking about with young adults? What does it look like in your ministry context?
Yeah, at Hillside Church, we do 18 to 30 years old. And it's interesting because when we started this ministry, we obviously wanted to hit kids in college and then also the young professionals. And what we've noticed, though, is that the large majority of our group is that 18 to 24 years old. And so, yeah, it's just interesting to see that. But yeah, technically we are 18 to 30 years old.
Yeah, for us, we're similar. We would say, whenever we put a number on it, people get mad. So I'm like, we just kind of took the numbers off. But I'd say it's about 18 to 28 is what we are. But I would echo Jimmy, being that we're close proximity. You guys have Mankato, Minnesota State, and University of Minnesota is close to us. So we definitely do go on that younger side. But a part of we have multiple different campuses, and so each campus kind of has a different expression. Some are a little bit younger, some are a little bit older, depending on if it's in a more rural area, if it's in a more suburban, or if it's urban. It's definitely the most young, but 18 to 28 is kind of the people that I get to steward.
Well, at Normandale Community College, we have students who are 16 years old taking PSEO classes, which is college credit. So we have individuals coming through that are 16, and then there's people on campus who are 16. But our prime, target that we're looking for is probably that 18 or 16 to 30-year-old, and so that's what we've been able to be working alongside with.
And I'll add on to what Micah just said is she helped me when we got married and we were dating and engaged, doing ministry together at the local church. We just called it 18 to 30 as young adults, and then we saw college students as a huge part of that. We saw career, like early career or young professional as a subcategory, and then we saw young couples as a third category. So you might see, like, what is God bringing to your ministry? When we got married, I'll tell you what, young couples came out of the woodwork. I had to limit the number of weddings that I'd officiate in a year because it's just like, it's your whole weekend and it's your day off. And anyway, so like what Micah told me is she had this idea, what if 25 to 30 was our target to lead? They might have a mortgage, they might be more stable, they might transition less, and they might be just a little bit more rooted, and then at the same time, 18 to 25 is a little bit more that young adult, so you can use the older to mentor the younger. And we've by no means arrived on anything. There's one guy who I wish could be here, he's from Wisconsin, Andrew Dawson. Andrew couldn't make it this weekend, but he was registered. He has a cool philosophy based on their setting in rural Wisconsin. They call it youngish, and it just works in their community. They call it youngish. He's in the Facebook group, both of them, and so you could get a hold of him, but you could even Instagram youngish. They have a really cool vibe, and they're just like, if you're young-ish, and they're just like, hey, if you're under 40, if you feel like you can come to a young adult event, so talk to your pastor, talk to your leader, but there's no silver bullet, it's just whatever your setting has.
So one thing with, as you talked yesterday, Josiah, about when ministries take off, it's exciting and lots of people are coming. How do you pastorally graciously navigate when that person who's probably outside of your, not even just your demographic, but maybe even leadership demographic, 55-year-old guy's like, this is awesome, can I come and be a part of the young adults ministry? How, as a pastor and as a leader, how do you navigate that potential awkward situation?
Want me to start? Go ahead. I think what people are looking for is they're looking for purpose and they're looking for belonging. And so I had a mentor one time who would say that if anytime I was a youth pastor at the time, anytime that I had a leader who didn't fit the culture of our youth ministry, he would say, find them another place to belong, another place for purpose. And so I would say the same thing in this scenario, as these people are looking for a place to belong and find purpose. And so help them do that. Literally take them to the next person, and don't just be like, sorry, you can't do anything. But we need to be that bridge for people to find purpose.
Can I just ask a follow-up question? Raise your hand if this has happened to you in your ministry. Okay, like a lot of hands. So if you've been in it for a while, it's probably happened. If you're newer, hint, this might happen. So pay attention to whatever they say.
One thing that we did when we were on staff at a church, I found this very helpful, was as I was leading, I led the women's side, Josiah led more or less the men's side, and with that, what I felt God downloaded in my heart was to help the women 25 or older transition into the women's ministry. So I went to the women's ministry pastor and leader and I said, hey, I know you guys are doing a Wednesday night Bible study. Do you mind if I bring 20 or 30 of our young adult women to help them transition into that next stage of life? So we teamed up for about 8 weeks and organically saw relationships, mentorship happen at the round tables week after week after week. And now some of those women are 32, 33 years old, still single, but they feel connected to the church because we took that time to invest in the round tables and invest in the ministries instead of being a siloed young adult ministry. We really took advantage of that. So that was very helpful. And I know Josiah has done some stuff on the men's side as well. So if that would ever work for your ministry, I'd encourage you to approach those other ministries and say, hey, can we team up for X amount of weeks, and can I bring this amount of people because I want to help them transition well and still feel connected versus I'm 30, I'm off the chart, I'm single, I'm just not going to be a part of anything. So that really decreased their fear of the next stage and increased their curiosity of other relationships outside of the 18 to 30-year-olds they had been currently surrounded with.
So Micah, you just alluded to it, but I'd love to hear from Logan and from Jimmy. I think one thing that's a danger when we have certain types of ministries is a silo effect. How at a multi-site campus, all these campuses you have in River Valley, how do you at Hillside help break down the silo walls and build a bridge to intergenerational ministry in their context?
Totally, yeah, and just defining silo too, I think. Maybe that is a term your pastors use, maybe it's not, but our leadership uses that term a lot. Basically, silo, a lot of times in ministry you can get into like your own thing, and especially young adult ministry, maybe your pastor or your leaders are like, yeah, that's fine to do it, it's like, go have your small group or go do what you want to do. But what can happen is you become disconnected to the vision. And I think that's something you fight every single day. Every single season that you're in young adult ministry, but in any ministry, maybe it's your youth ministry, you say, hey, we're killing it, we're crushing it, we have 50 students, it's the biggest ministry in our town, but you're disconnected from the local church, and you meet in the church, but you're actually not a part of your church, and none of your students are attending on weekends, none of your students want to serve, and you may have a thing that looks great on the outside, but it's not integrated with the vision. Now that doesn't mean that if your young adults or your youth don't come to your church, you're an absolute failure. But I think that there is a point to say, I'm under the authority of my lead pastor. In my context, it happens to be my father. But I'm under the authority of the leadership that's in front of me. And so I don't want to be siloed. I don't want to have my own thing. And so fighting against that, it's saying, are we going to encourage people to be a part of our weekend service? Is that a thing that we're going to do every single service that we're going to talk about? We're a part of this church, even though our name may be a cool, fun, different name. we are part of this church, and we're unashamed about that. We're not trying to be cooler than them because this is who's, giving us the money to order pizza. This is who's doing this for us. And but not only that, this is the vision that we're serving. And I think for me, the more that I recognize that I'm serving the vision of our leadership, the more I recognize that I don't have a young adult ministry because I'm so great and I'm an amazing young adult pastor. I have a young adult ministry because people have gone before me to sacrifice and to serve, to start this church. And I wouldn't have a young adult ministry had the church not existed. And so, or if you're in a campus ministry, somebody has probably been on that campus before you. Somebody's probably served before you. And I heard a missionary say this once. I'm trying to find out who it was because I want to quote them. But they said, if the work seems to be easy, it's because someone sacrificed before you. And if the work is hard, that means somebody is going to have success after you. And so, for me, there's been seasons where I'm having success, and that's because people have sacrificed before me. And if it's hard, I'm praying and believing God, maybe somebody after me is going to see success and a harvest from this. So that's what I try and think about.
For us, one of the best ways to help with the silo effect is have your pastor have a kid in the young adults ministry. So he cared a lot, and that's when we started. Was when one of his kids was a young adult, and so became a young adult, and we wanted to do something. And so that was a big thing. But having leadership support, obviously from your senior pastor, is one of the most important things because you guys all know when the senior pastor backs something, it gets through, it's successful, and so you want that from the stage on Sundays. You want them to be talking good about your young adults ministry. But I will say this too, with the silo effect, you're the only one that's ever going to advocate for young adult ministry in your church. If you take you out of the equation, no one else is going to ask for more money. No one is going to ask for more time and more resources from your church than you. And so you might feel a little bit awkward in the moment to bring something up and talk about young adults in your staff meetings or for budgets and that kind of thing. But just remember, you're the only one that's doing that. You're the only one that's fighting for them. And so stay strong. No one else is going to do it.
That's good. So in a marathon, there's the start, which is exciting. Lots of people, lots of hype. The finish line's exciting, but sometimes those middle miles are the toughest. It's the grind, it's hitting the wall. And for the people that may be here today who have felt like in young adult ministry, campus ministry, they've hit the wall, what words of wisdom would you give to them so they can continue going on in this race of ministry?
I just jump in. Undeveloped thought here, so forgive me, it's raw, it's real, but I think hitting the wall is like the best place to be. I remember 18 years old, Brent was like, hey, you just graduated high school, let's run a marathon next weekend. So I did, and I didn't train before, and I hit a wall earlier than I care to admit, because usually experts are like, oh, 23, man, 24, oh, no, 25, that's where I hit my wall in a 26.2 mile run. But I hit the wall at like 13. Met a guy. He said he had some stuff that would help heal my cramps. It was like potassium tablets, supposedly.
The random guy.
I just took it. And years later, he came into my place of employment. I gave him a free birthday party because I didn't let him pay for it. He helped me with my cramps years ago. Never forgot that guy. But back to the wall. I think the wall might be the best place to be. Here's why. When you start out, it's like, Lord, if you don't come, I don't want to go because nothing's going to happen. Lord Jesus, if I'm desperate for you because I don't know what to do. And then as you get going, the miles do get easier. And I talked about hitting coast or hitting cruise control or hitting autopilot, and that's a dangerous place of sinking sand, of building on jello. And I just say, like, when you hit the wall, man, I love the song, This Is How I Fight My Battles, because I just worship with that, with my knees on the ground, because Louis Giglio says the distance between, hope and despair, or the distance to breakthrough, is 20 inches. The difference from your knee to the floor, about 20 inches. That's how close we are to breakthrough. And so I say in your ministries, if you're at a wall, like you're 20 inches from breakthrough, you're 20 inches from takeoff. Watch this thing take off, and it's going to be because God. It's not going to be because grit, stay with it, stick with itness is awesome, but I just say depend on the Holy Spirit. He'll lead you past the wall.
I think one thing that I would say is continue to trust God even when you feel like you're in the trenches pioneering by yourself. And I think I've been there in ministry wondering, like, God, have you truly called me to do this? Why? I'm the one that's going before. A pioneer goes before others. And sometimes it's hard to trust him. And the vision that I get in this question, Brent, is simply God putting his hands to the till, going through the field, and I'm walking alongside him or behind him because he's going to plow the way and pioneer the way. And he should always go before us. So I would say if you are wrestling in your ministry, stay in the trenches. Just like that quote that Logan shared, I would say that you are pioneering something that you may never see the fruit to. Like we look about it in Hebrews 11, about the people who are the faith-filled warriors, essentially. And none of them saw the promise physically or got to experience it. So even taking Moses, for example, Moses took the people through the land, but he never actually got to step into the promised land. He was pioneering a way for Joshua. And you can just go through the entire list of individuals who've gone before, and you might feel like you're a Moses and you're wandering in the desert, but I want to encourage you that God will make a way when there seems to be no way, and if you allow him to put his hand to the plow, whether that's your heart, and he's weeding and he's pruning and he's plucking people out of your ministry, that's okay, because that means he is really preparing the soil for your ministry to take root and to begin to flourish and to begin to grow. So I just want to encourage you. I've been there. I'll probably be there again. So just really holding on to the promises that God has for you, because you never know who's going to come behind you.
Yeah, I just add one thing to that. I find that, similar to what Micah was saying, when I'm in this season where I'm up against the wall, in anything in life, not just in ministry, but just in anything, I find it's often because I lost my passion. And I think sometimes we when we talk about entrepreneurship, we're like, find something you're passionate about and just do that. And it's like, well, I need to make money. I can't just skip in the fields, all the time. Just love doing that.
Great visual.
It's my life group. My life group, skipping in the fields. Just 6 feet apart though. But I think sometimes we're in this season of life or ministry or school or whatever it is, and it's just like, why am I doing this? What am I doing with my life? I don't know if you ever had that moment. I feel like it happens every week for me. And you're like, I could be doing something else, or am I even, cut out for this? Or can I even hold the mantle of leadership that God's put on my life? It's just like the devil, and then he knows where you're at, and he just starts attacking you with all these things. And I often look back to the moments where I was the most passionate. And usually it comes from an outrageous amount of time in the presence of God. And I have different seasons, whether that be a summer camp, or whether that be a retreat, or whether that be a time where we went on a mission trip, or I did an internship in the Middle East, and I look back to times where God spoke to me the clearest. And when I came back from those things, I remember when I came back from that internship, I was in Lebanon for 3 months. I got back, I was telling every waiter or waitress about Jesus. I was like, can I pray for you for anything? I had just spent time alone in a country I knew nobody in, a language I didn't know. I had to rely on God, but I came back on fire. But then a few months later, you lose the passion because you lost the time that you were with Jesus. And I think for me, the times where I'm the most tired and the most against the wall is usually because I haven't been filling myself up. I feel like we hear messages on that a lot, but we don't really listen. And I'm included in this. I sometimes am so guilty of doing ministry but not being ministered to by my Heavenly Father. And so, and maybe you're feeling that way. I would bet that you'd say the time that I've been spending with Jesus isn't the same as maybe it was when I first was passionate about it. And maybe it's the same, but maybe the season you're in requires more. Maybe you say, I've been reading my Bible 30 minutes every day, and now all of a sudden it's just not the same. Well, maybe the level of leadership that God's put in your life, whether it be in your job or in your ministry, you need to do more. You need to fill yourself up in a different way. And so that's my weekly battle.
I'll tell you what, I've been in seasons like that too, where you just, once you hit that wall, it's so easy when things are going really good and things are brand new that you can have this fresh vision and people are excited. But yeah, when you finally hit that, I tell you what, you learn a lot about yourself, and you start really learning those self-disciplines to keep your ministry healthy, to keep it fun and exciting for everybody else. Because I'm a top-down kind of guy, and everything rises and falls on leadership. And so I think when you are going through those seasons where things just aren't that exciting, I think your leaders feel it. I think your ministry feels it too. And so eventually you're going to get to a place where you go, okay, I've been doing this for 3-4 years. How do we keep it fresh? How do you keep it fresh? How do you stay in a position long term? Because I think that's something that a lot of this generation and group of ministers, we switch roles a lot. And so I think for you to understand that and you to learn that is a great thing to add to your resume.
That's good. Thank you so much, guys. We'll have to take a question from you guys. Who has a question they'd like to ask? Yeah, Joe.
So it seems like, I don't know any statistics, but it seems like having a young adult ministry in a church isn't a given from my experiences. So what were your personal experiences that led you to see the need to have adult ministries in churches?
You're asking to see the need of young adult ministry in your churches?
Yeah, but what were your personal experiences that kind of, where you started to notice the need for you to have adult ministries in your churches?
Can you just say it one more time?
Sure,
So we can
sure. Yeah, I'm sure this room just absorbs all the sound. So I said I don't know any statistics, but I think it seems like having an adult ministry isn't a given in churches, and I wanted to know what your personal experiences were that kind of led you to see the need for that in your churches.
I mean, we have a university that's just down the street from us, a couple miles away. We have a lot of young adults who come to our third service, our latest service, and so that was the biggest thing we started noticing. We also noticed that a lot of our young adults were serving in our youth ministry as leaders, and we knew that it was important for them to be involved, and they were looking for that community, looking for that purpose, and so those were all little things that we were taking notice of. There's a big group of people. They're wanting to serve. They're wanting to stay connected. And like I said, my pastors did have a couple kids who were in that age range, which helped as well. But we noticed these things, and so when we launched, it was easy because they were already coming. They were already involved, and it just came together well.
Yeah, we had different young adult ministries that were like unofficial ministries that would just kind of pop up. I think something in a healthy church is you have people that are young adults, but I think again it depends on the context. What a young adult means. We talked about the age range. I guess that's up to your context. But I think hopefully the best thing could be if it came from the top, as Jimmy was saying, like this is something that we want to see. But I think you'll start to see it maybe in the prayer requests. I don't know if you guys do like connect cards or prayer cards that you do. We see a lot of prayer requests as, hey, I'm feeling lonely. And then you look at their birthday and you do the math. And you go, okay, they're 23. They're feeling lonely. That's something that I look at a lot every single week at our campuses. We're getting requests from people. I'm feeling lonely. I'm feeling this. They're not saying, I need a young adult ministry. I need to be in a group. But as leaders and ministers, we can say, I know the antidote to being that way. And so maybe if you don't do, requests, maybe that's something to start doing. But we generally try and, not just in young adult ministry, but I think that question could be for how do you know when to start any type of ministry? Usually we base that on the requests that we're receiving. So if all of a sudden we're getting tons of things that are saying, my marriage is struggling, my marriage is struggling, my marriage is struggling, maybe we do need to do a marriage night or a marriage conference or a marriage group launch. And so I think that could be a good way to know, all right, we're starting to get a lot of people, and maybe it's not loneliness, but even just people who filled out their information to say, hey, they filled out their information. We're getting a lot of people who are 26, 27. Like, maybe we should start a group for that. Or we're getting a lot of people that are in college. Maybe we should do something for that. And we can use our eye test, but I feel like our eye test sometimes fails us because I hear from people all over, even at some of our campuses, we just don't have very many young adults. No, I actually have the data right here. There's 300 people that have come in the last year that are in that age range. Like, here's their information. Like, call them. So I think sometimes the eye test fails us, but maybe the actual request maybe can help. So that's practical.
My personal experience happened back in North Dakota when I was living there, and I was serving on a youth team every Wednesday night and found myself as a young adult at age 22, 23, not having anything going on during the week, not having anywhere to go in the church myself. So I approached one of the pastors, and he was the youth pastor at the time, and I said, hey, Pastor, this is what I'm experiencing. I'm I realized I've been being selfish and not making myself available on a Wednesday night to students because I am worshiping just as much as they are, and I'm not making myself available, and that's not fair. So he looked at me and he goes, Micah, just start a young adult ministry. And I was like 23, how in the world do you start a young adult ministry, you know? So I felt empowered by that pastor to begin to pray. He goes, start in prayer. So I began to pray literally for 2 years. And the amazing thing is that God answered that prayer 2 years later. What happened was 2 students that were like 16 at the time ended up graduating, obviously at age 18, started going to a local college, and they started meeting, and they were the answer to my prayer because I found out about it and I started going, and at that time I was probably 24, 25 and felt like I was too old. But 12 of us rallied together and we saw a need in the church and we met that need, meaning there were 70, 80 young adults coming every single Sunday with no place to go, no Bible study to get connected to. So it literally went from 12 to 35. By the time it hit 75, the lead pastor saw that that was a need that he was overlooking, and he said, we need to find a young adult pastor and we need to start praying because I'm not going to lead this ministry. So God is preparing somebody else to. And I was not credentialed, I was not licensed. And so we just began to pray as 35, 75 students. And within 1 year, it had gone, after they brought a pastor in to pastor us, he totally had a vision, he totally had a heart for what was going on. And he was truly an answer to our prayer as a team. And from January to January, it increased by 100%. So every single Thursday night, we would gather together at the church, and it was 100 people. 12 months later, it was an average of 200 every single Thursday night, and Bible studies started happening. So we were meeting and having those connection points throughout the week. So Sunday, as a Bible study, we would attend one service, serve one service. So attend one, serve one. Tuesdays, I would host a Bible study in our house. It went from like 8 of us to 30. And the pastor's like, you need to multiply. The Francis Chan model, don't use the word divide, but you need to multiply. So we had probably within 1 year over 200 to 300 young adults come through some form of Bible study. And then we would meet again on a Thursday night, which was our big gathering, and a conference came out of that. And so many amazing things are truly birthed out of prayer, like we've talked or we've heard about last night. And I just want to encourage you, if you feel like you're in a place where you need to multiply and not divide, get on your knees and start praying, because God will bring the people. And to this day, it's still going, averaging 200 plus every Thursday night or whatever night they have chosen, and a conference came out of that, and over 500 young adults between Minnesota and North Dakota had come together probably, 7 years ago, 5 to 7 years ago, for the first Emerging Voices conference. So instead of having leaders in the room like this, we opened it up to the students. So I would just say, God wants to multiply, and there's always room at his table. So do what he's called you to do and continue to let him move. So that's my personal experience of not having to place myself as a young adult. So just honored that we've been able to come this far this quickly. So
Joe, I'll just tag on to that real quickly. I think to answer your question, it is rare to see a church that has a full-fledged young adult ministry effort. However, in the past 7 years, I've watched in Minnesota, I knew of 3 young adult ministries. I know of now over 40. So there's rapid growth, and there's a long way to go in Minnesota and across the nation, because there's 384,000 churches in America. We believe that they all need an expression of a young adult ministry. It might be a Bible study, a small group. And I'll just share briefly, for me, it was all about heartbreak and burden. I had a close family member. I got saved the same night they got saved at a Billy Graham event right downtown. They walked away from their faith when they reached college, and that broke my heart. I had a crisis of faith, and I was just burdened for the generation. Then our church did a youth building, attached to the main building, like a theater, and it was cement floor like this. And Brent and another youth pastor brought us in. They said, write down the names of 5 of your friends that you pray get saved. I wrote down their names in chalk. You could rip up the carpet, you could see it. They all got saved in that room. And so I just started, and then I go on a field trip. One of my friends is Mike Miz. He gave us the rights to his song, Feel Alive, that if you've listened to the podcast, we use that song. He goes to North Dakota, Chi Alpha of 20 students. He gets involved. It goes to over 200-300. And what's crazy, I go to visit his hip hop concert. And I saw a scene in the party scene that night after the concert that broke my heart forever for the college campus. And then we started to see a move of God. But I was just always burdened about, what about my family? What about my friends? What about the people I meet at Mall of America or at Normandale or wherever I go? What about the young adults? And so I think that you're like that. You're here in this room and God's going to use you. And so we can take more questions.
Another question from out there? Yeah.
We're in.
Got a microphone for you.
All right. We're in the youngish kind of thing with being a small town. But when you have that, you have so many people at different stages of life. So when you're organizing events and things like that, you got some people with kids, some people with older kids, some people that are single, some people that are just newly married. How do you kind of plan events that meet everyone's needs? Well, since we're a smaller town, we can't really do that multiply, we can't have separate things. We gotta all be together to get 10 people. But, how do you plan for such different variety of stages of life in the young adult ministry?
Man, that's really difficult. It's super hard to go broad like that, because I feel like when you do, it's like you're the senior with the sixth grader coming in to youth ministry. It's that feel where you go, man, I've got kids. How in the world? There's people here who are 18, 19 years old, and I'm supposed to get along with them. They have no idea what this next stage of life is like, and so it's really difficult. We just try to target that 18 to 24, and hopefully the older kind of catch that vision. Josiah was saying how he incorporated them into leadership roles. I love that. I think that's a great thing to do. We've seen that in our own ministry, that we kind of utilize the older ones to help partner with us to put these events on, and in the process they're blessed. Yeah, you gotta pick a target. You can't just flock shoot. I know we want to, like you said, in a smaller church, be really, really broad with it to incorporate everybody. But I think if you do that, you start to lose a little bit of the fringes. And so I would just say, focus on your target that you feel like is most successful, and go with that.
I think too, I think that the more you focus, the easier it gets, obviously. But maybe where you're at, you'd say, okay, if I focus, I'm gonna have to ditch the other people, because maybe there's no one else to do it. One thing that we're dealing with right now with this whole coronavirus thing is all of our services move digital, and because we're not allowed to meet since the governor's mandate here. So we're saying, rather than, oh wow, this is terrible, this is horrible, we're saying this is an opportunity for us to do something new that we've never done before. So I think that if you look at it from a negative side, to say, oh my gosh, we're gonna have to give up half our people, all that obviously that's a negative thing. But if you look at it from an optimistic side, say I could do something that nobody's ever done before. Maybe we figure out a way where we can meet at the same location but have two different groups. Maybe we could figure out a way where the younger ones actually have even younger siblings who they're going to bring to take care of the youngest ones. And it's I think when your back's against the wall, you help to innovate. And I also think there's a lot, I truly believe, and people look at our church sometimes, and if you're not familiar, we have 9 different locations and they see it. I truly believe that the future of the church will be who can figure out how to do ministry the smallest and most effective. And that's something that our conversations are having. People say, oh, well, you guys are big. No, I think, can we do it with 5? Can we do it with 10? But can we do it with 10 really great? And that's something that I think everyone's trying to figure out right now. It's easy. I mean, if ever you've preached, it's way better to preach with more people in the room. It's way easier. But who can preach really great with 10? Who can preach really great with a few? And so if you can figure it out, I would take that as a mantle of opportunity to say, God's given me this thing. If we can do things that maybe people haven't done before, not copying what they do because it's not going to work for us, but we now have the opportunity to innovate and create something new. Maybe it's developing more leaders, maybe it's meeting in a different context. But I think if you look at it in that exciting way, it changes it a little bit, and then it looks at it more of a challenge rather than a missed opportunity or something. So.
Going back to the small community, how would you I'm bad at referring. How would you deal with like generational curses? Because a lot of people in our community, they grew up there, their parents grew up there, their grandparents grew up there, and they all do the same thing, and they all look up to their family, but how do we appeal to them that this is okay to do too? This is fun. We don't have to do other things in a small community when everyone's already got their niches, their cliques, and how do we break that?
Well, I grew up in a town of 1,200 people, so I grew up in that and I understand that, and I know where you're coming from when you ask that question. One thing that I have learned to do, what was done to me, is to put that faith back on those individuals. Because if I would ride on the coattails of my parents, well, if they're going to heaven, I'm going to heaven. And it was about 18 years old where I had the realization there's going to be a day when I'm going to have to stand with God face to face. I'm not going to be there with my mom. I'm not going to be there with my dad. So I had somebody in my life and in the ministry that I was a part of as a youth group, or a young adult or youth or whatever, and just really challenged, you need to learn how to own your faith. And I think for me, personally, identifying what are my, like Logan talked about, passion. What are my personal passions as a young adult or youth? How do I discover what God has created me to do? So even they took us through studies of spiritual gifts and assessments that would help, and not only cater to the ministry, but help me as a person identify what do I love to do and what has God created me to do. And once I started personally discovering that, my parents were more open-minded to discover and see the fact that, oh, Micah has the gift of X, Y, and Z. Now as a parent, I may not understand that. And so how do I cater to my child? How do I identify their 5 love languages and love them well? How do I let them know that I'm empowering them versus telling them what they have to believe in? So I don't know if that really answers your question, but I think providing opportunities to create an atmosphere where people can ask those hard questions. One fun thing that we did to see and to open our own eyes as young adults in the church when I moved to Bismarck was we would host generational gap. What was it called? Well, it was like a mixer, yeah, but it was like generational table things that we would do. So, for example, one thing that opened our eyes as young people and the older generation above us was just hosting this event. And what we did was we took a team of 27 of us, went to Alaska on a mission trip. And we had all these individuals from church praying for us. People we didn't even know, 30 years older, 50 years older. And we came back from that trip and we had all these amazing stories to tell and to share what God was doing. And the generations above wanted to hear about that. So what we did is we as young adults, we actually hosted and prepared an entire meal and we had them sign up and we had different people around the table. And come to find out that the generation above, like 2 above us, really wanted to discover more and understand us, just as much as us as millennials wanted to understand them. So I don't know if that talks about the generational curses, but we found out when we were around the table, people had been praying every single day in that church for 32 years to experience that breakthrough. So I think you have to start praying off the generational curses and bridging that gap as leaders. In addition to how do you empower, the question I think none of us may have, but approaching your ministry, how do I empower the students that I have to learn how to think for themselves, discover their relationship with Christ by themselves, and let them know that if you come from a Catholic faith background, it's okay to still attend our event. It's okay to do this. And they may not understand everything all the time, or we may not understand them, but to learn how to create opportunities where they can freely ask questions, where they're not going to be judged, where they're not going to feel silly or stupid. That's just what has helped for me as a young adult, starting at probably age 14, 15, into 18 and beyond. So I don't know if I just talked a lot there or if that made any sense.
Just a couple of minutes left here. A question just came in about what's the greatest need that you see for the young adults that you're serving, and how have you built community around that?
Yeah, I think in today people are really lonely. I agree. Josiah agrees.
The witness.
Yeah. I think that it's difficult to pastor people when they don't have people to rub shoulders with. I think if you look at the early church, the reason why Acts was so powerful was because there was a group, it wasn't a big group of 12, that they just experienced something unbelievable. And what they did is they said, we're going to go out, we're going to spread out, but we need more. And so we're going to get other people. But it took a few who spent radical time with Jesus to go out. But I think for many people, we say, all right, read your Bibles, come to church, do this thing. But I think for a lot of people, even what Josiah was talking about last night, they really do need a best friend. And so before we start pastoring them in terms of you need to change your lifestyle, I think a lot of times Christians can miss that mark when they come in looking for people and we start talking, laws and things that they need to do, that you need to clean up yourself and you need to change all this. But if you look at the life of Jesus, that's actually not what he did. First, he said, I want to spend time with you. I want to get to know you. Secondly, we're going to work on your heart. We're going to work on the things that you're doing. And so the way that we build our ministry around that would be, we want community to be the first thing that people are experiencing. We want people to get into a group. We want people to start jumping in. We don't, even like our serving, if you're serving on a weekend, you don't have to have a qualification to serve. If you're in a leadership role where you're teaching or things, that's different. But we say, all can attend our church, no matter what the background is. Most people can serve, unless you have some sort of criminal conviction that would keep you from our kids ministry. We're not going to put you there. But we want everyone to jump in and serve because we know God's going to change your heart. But really, we want people to get connected with somebody. So getting our group leaders to jump in. And so our natural, what is the next step for you, for young adults, is we need you to get into a group, because if you don't have people to surround you, you're just not going to stick around. And so that's kind of the model that we push towards.
We've got about 2 more minutes.
Josiah, one thing too, we were on a Zoom call with, is it Jolene Erlacher?
Yes.
Right? And what she was saying that essentially like one of the biggest issues that young adults deal with compared to any other generation was like emotional disorders or like things like that, right? It was a cause of suicide or
easily.
Yeah. So I mean, like when you think about that, I mean, like going back to even what Logan says, that feeling of belonging, that feeling of community is such a big deal. And so for us, in a real practical step for you, if you're in a smaller church or maybe haven't started your young adult ministry yet, we just started like an open, small/large group at our church, and we just said Monday nights, 7 o'clock. If you want to come. And this generation, you guys know this, non-committal. I mean, we can never get numbers. We can never get numbers for any of our events. We have no idea how much food to order or anything like that. So we just kind of guess. But that Monday night thing really worked well for us to kind of launch our ministry. We still do that because it's non-committal. If people want to show up, they can show up, and there's going to be community there. If they don't want to, they don't have to. And so it's kind of like I can belong when I want to on their own terms. It's kind of like when you go to like Best Buy or Target or whatever, and the person's coming up to ask you if you need any help, and you're like, no, get away from me, until you finally want the help, until you want to be noticed.
Get behind me.
So yeah, exactly. So we kind of use that approach for our church, and it worked really well.
I just wanted to add one more thing. I just felt God kind of put this on my heart. Question back on the generational curses thing. My grandmother had been a part of that, and her father was abusive, and her grandfather was abusive, and she hated being around them. And she wasn't a Christian. She had a kid before she was married, and put her up for adoption, and was just living her own way. And all of a sudden, God got a hold of her heart. And I think if you'd asked her, she's obviously not here with us. She's actually spoken at our young adult event before, 77. Yeah, you guys were there. Yeah, it was so good. But I think the biggest thing that I see with people, and I was struggling with this in high school, I said, Dad, all my friends feel like they got everything under control, but I know they don't. Their needs are taken care of. We live in America where many people, although we have real needs here, there's a lot of people who have their basic needs taken care of. And so their need for Jesus just isn't prevalent in their life until maybe death, or people say births and deaths are when things all of a sudden are real to people. And so I was kind of praying about it, and I felt God really tell me, and my grandma's echoed this, my dad's echoed this, but the way that we can really break generational curses is to be working in the prophetic. And I don't know where you're at in your Holy Spirit world in the church. I know a lot of us come from the Assemblies of God or different places, but Paul talks about how the prophetic gift is one that is it's the best one because it's the most uplifting. And I think when you're able to look somebody in the eye, maybe they've grown up in the same town, their dad's an alcoholic, their mom is maybe their parents are separated, or maybe they live in the same house but they're not in this incongruence, kind of the way Tennyson was talking about. I think looking them straight in the eye and getting a word from God that says, I know that your parents are not haven't been the best parents to you. I know that you maybe are going through one of the toughest times in your life. I know that you think alcoholism has to be your future, but what I see in you is this. I see in you a daughter who's beautiful, who's amazing, who has a future, and I know that the gifts that God's given you to talk and to teach, even though your parents say that you're a terrible communicator, I see that you're an amazing one. And when you shared your testimony at our young adult group this last week, I saw a future in you, and the person that I see you is someone who can use this. You came from a small town, but you can be used for great things. And somebody to look at them is kind of what Josiah was saying, to have someone who believes in them, I believe is the way that our generational curses are broken. I believe that no matter how big your young adult ministry is, whether you have thousands or whether you have a couple, it's looking somebody in the eye and giving them a word that's from the Lord and being willing to hear from that, because that's something they can't get on Instagram. That's something they can't get from anybody else. But as a young adult leader, you can give that to them by your time in prayer. And so that's something I felt like God wanted me to share. And no matter where you're at, I think God can use that. So sorry for going over time on that.
No, you're good. We're going to take one final question here, but just before we do that, I understand you're probably like, no, I didn't get my question answered. We didn't get to talk about it. The cool thing is that this is the beginning of a discussion that can continue in the Facebook groups. If you're not a part of that, we would love for you to join that discussion and subscribe to the podcast. It is a gold mine of answers like this. So we have a question over here.
And just on the Facebook group, you can search it right now while Morgan sets up Marvin to there's two. If you're from Minnesota, there's one called MN, Minnesota Young Adult Pastors. And then every state, I think a lot of you are a part of it, but it's called Young Adult Ministry Leaders. You can Facebook, Google, you know how you search on Facebook? You can Facebook search it, and you'll find both groups, and we'll close with this question.
I'll try to do it in less than 30 seconds. So young adult ministry, whether it be young adult ministry or college ministry, how do you guys bridge the two together? So for instance, we're in a metro area, and in our church we have a good maybe two handfuls of young adults, but then we're surrounded by colleges. In your experience, how do you get plugged into the college scene and getting college students that do not attend your church to, even if they don't come on a Sunday morning, but to just get them plugged in into the young adult ministry that you guys are forming?
I'll just jump on that, Marvin. Amazing question. Love you, bro. And I just look at two guys standing in this room. Ryan Koster is at the U of M. He's doing Chi Alpha ministry there. Amazing leader. And when I was on staff at Cedar Valley Church, there was just a burden on my heart for young adults in the Twin Cities. And Ryan happened to be a part of our church, I needed an MC for our young adult nights. So I asked him and his associate, hey, she's awesome. I was like, hey, Ryan and Alec, could you just come? And you guys are great on the microphone. It took a burden off of our shoulders. And then Brent Silkey is over in St. Paul doing ministry there. And so we would just invite their groups in. And at the same time, I just said, anything you guys need, I'm there for you. So when, one of my favorite moments in young adult ministry at the local church, Brent Silkey, my youth pastor, we were on staff together then, youth pastor, young adult pastor. He was launching a Chi Alpha college ministry in St. Paul. We got to bring a local missions trip for a week from our young adult ministry. I think there was eight or 10 young adults who went, and we went door to door, dorm to dorm. We were at their welcome week, which is massive on a college campus. And we weren't throwing the services. We just said, anything you need, we're there for you. Kind of like in John Stamos in Full House. He's like, I'm there for you, babe. And so you just drop the babe, and you're just like, I'm there for you. But I think one of the most key things you can do is just serve. And maybe it's going and guest speaking on a night, or going and just praying for college students at an existing college ministry, joining a prayer walk that's happening and adding value to what God's already blessing. Or it might be the flip side of college students are one day going to graduate. And so if you're a part of a college ministry, you're a parachurch. So that college ministry is not your Sunday church. It's not your church. But where are the grandmas on a college campus? So how could a college student get involved by just attending a church and just knowing that there's a safe place?
Yeah, one follow-up to that. That was 4 years ago. We have students that are in our ministry that are seniors that when Josiah brought the team down and knocked on doors that are still in our ministry 4 years later. So when a church can partner with ministries on campus or can be a blessing and add value, man, it's like the kingdom of God opens up to new levels.
Yeah, we've had an experience that we're kind of like a couple years into just jumping on the college campus. I would echo what Josiah said. I think one of the first things that I tried to do was reach out to people who I knew that were there. Ryan's one of those people. And Ryan their ministry already had people come into our church on the weekend. And I think one thing I've noticed, and I know this is a topic you could open up a giant can of, forever, but like, it's super easy to cheer people on who are far away from you, but the people who are close to you, it's kind of like, what do I do? Like, we're on the same college campus. Like, you come to my thing. You know what I mean? That's like your natural attitude. And I think one way that I've helped overcome that, because that's natural. I don't think it's a sin to have that like thought to say, I would rather have them come to mine than yours. It's just a natural thing. But it's when you think, no, what is the goal here? It's to reach people for Jesus. And so the way I've overcome that is instead of being distant from people, it's trying to be as close as I can. So I sat down with Ryan right away. Hey, just so you know, we're going to be meeting. Is there anything we could do together? We ended up not figuring out a way to like make our ministries work together, but we said, you know what we should do? We should cheer each other on and just love you guys, love your people in your ministry, love people in ours. So if anyone's like, hey, I'm part of Chi Alpha, I can't come to your life group, I'm like, don't. Like, Ryan's the best. You got to hang out with him. But also knowing there are so many people that are not being ministered to. And so I'm not going up to the Chi Alpha people and whispering, hey, you should quit and be a part of our life groups. But what I am saying is, hey, if you aren't a part of anything and you aren't a part of that, I'd love for you to jump and be a part of this. Or if our schedule doesn't work for you, maybe their schedule does, and I'm going to cheer them on. So I don't see Ryan a ton. We meet every once in a while with stuff, but I cheer him on, and anytime I meet somebody, all the Chi Alpha people are like, we love your church, you're amazing, they're encouraging to us, and we try and be the same that way. So knowing that there's people who've done ministry there before, and not trying to like blow stuff up, we're going to try and reach different people so that we can do it together. And then the last thing I'll say is when we started our university service there, I didn't start it until I prayer walked for 3 months before. And so we're going to start in the fall. So it was about April, so it's about 5 months. Where literally every Wednesday morning I would go prayer walk at 6:30 in the morning. I'm not a morning person, still I'm not. And I had
young adult pastors usually aren't.
No, that's why I'm in young adult ministry. But I would get there at 6:30, meet some students and leaders, and we would just walk around campus and pray. And that was kind of the way we started. So those are the two things that I would say would be the best things to get started on college campus.
Yeah, for me, what I did, I just took a week, and I'm from our church is about 750. We have a university that's right down the street, like I said. And just starting out, I took some time, I took a week, and I just went through every single college ministry that was happening there, all the leaders. I got all of their information, and I took time to email all of them individually just to say, hey, we have a young adult ministry, we're in town, we just want you to know that we're here. I know sometimes having ministries that are smaller, not huge, people sometimes want a break, and so I just offered myself, and I just said, hey, I've been speaking for 10 years, and would love, if you ever need a break or whatever, I would love to come in and not push my own ministry, but just give you a break and preach God. And so offer yourself as a free resource to them and just let them know that it's not going to cost them anything. But then try to meet with them, like they were saying, just try to take time to get to know them, because you guys are all ministering in the same town. And I think a lot of times we work against each other, and I don't necessarily think that's what God really wants from us. And remember this, all the college kids in your city, in your town, your area, they are God's, not yours. And I think sometimes we like to hoard that and really separate ourselves from other ministries, and we work against each other. And so just remember that keep an open palm with them, and remember that these are God's people. So
Word. You guys, can we give it up for our panel? We're going to transition to our next thing here. We're actually gonna, this is really cool. I think Josiah and Michael will probably have this picture up in their house for the rest of their lives together, forever. We're gonna take a group picture on the other side right after this. And then after that, headshots are available. We'll take a 15-minute break. Again, restrooms are on the 3rd floor, not the 4th floor, so go to the 3rd floor. Jamba Juice is also on the 3rd floor, so if you want to do that, that's great. So if everyone can just stand up right now and get a stretch break, we're gonna go to the other side for a group picture.